Bucharest in the spring of '76 smelled like diesel smoke and desperation. I was sitting in a back office of the embassy annex when the station chief walked in with a folder under his arm and that look on his face, the one that said somebody's about to get volunteered for something nobody else wanted. "Billy," he said, dropping the folder on the desk between us, "we've got a problem." I didn't touch the folder. Not yet. What kind of problem? The kind that involves the Securitate, a safe house in Sector 4, and about 6 months of blown operations. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. They've been running counter surveillance out of a residential building, watching our people, tracking our assets, compromising every goddamn thing we try to move through this city. The Securitate, Romania's secret police. Nasty bunch of bastards. Ceausescu's personal enforcers. And they were good at their job, which made them a pain in the ass for us. They'd been tightening the noose on agency operations in Bucharest for months. Every meat got shadowed. Every dead drop got rolled up. Every asset got identified and either turned or disappeared. How many operations? I asked. 6 confirmed compromises in 4 months. 3 assets arrested. 1 disappeared. We think he's dead. The other 2 flipped, feeding us garbage now. He tapped ash into a tray. We traced it back to this safe house. They're running a surveillance team out of a second-floor apartment, rotating shifts. Professional setup. They've got eyes on 3 of our primary routes and 2 of our backup sites. I opened the folder. Photographs, floor plans, a building schematic, surveillance logs. The apartment was in a gray concrete block in Sector 4. Typical communist architecture. Ugly, functional, built to last. The Securitate had chosen well. Good sight lines, multiple exit routes, blended into the neighborhood. "Why come to me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "'Cause the front office won't authorize a direct action. Too sensitive. Too much risk of international incident if it goes sideways. But they also won't authorize pulling out of Bucharest, which means we keep bleeding operations." He leaned forward. "So we need someone who can make this problem go away without making it look like we made it go away." There it was. The real ask. Not surveillance, not intelligence collection. They wanted the safe house gone. Burned to the ground, literally or figuratively, and they wanted it done quietly enough that nobody could prove we'd done it. Volunteer for everything. That's what I'd always told people. Volunteer for everything. They come up, don't turn anything down, and what looks insignificant might turn out to be the best thing going. What looks impossible might be your ticket to something better. And this looked goddamn impossible, which meant it was exactly the kind of thing I wanted. "What's the timeline?" I asked. 2 weeks to plan. Then we move. The Securitate rotates their teams monthly. We've got a window before the next rotation when they'll be at minimum staffing skeleton crew, maybe 2 or 3 guys instead of the usual 6. That's our shot. I studied the photographs again. The building had 4 floors. The safe house was second floor, corner apartment. Windows facing 2 directions. Fire escape accessible from the back. The neighborhood was working class, dense, nosy, plenty of eyes. Any commotion would draw attention fast. "I'll need a cover," I said. "Something that gets me into the building without raising flags." "We've got you set up as a telecommunications consultant, a British passport, working for a contracting firm, doing infrastructure surveys for the state telephone company. Gives you reason to be in residential areas, asking questions, poking around utility access points. Not bad, not agricultural, which I'd done to death in Southeast Asia. Telecommunications work meant I could move through buildings, check wiring systems, access basements and roof spaces. Plausible reason to be everywhere. "Equipment?" I asked. "Whatever you need. Just keep it quiet. No heavy ordnance, nothing that screams American military." I closed the folder. "I'll take it." He nodded, stood up, ground out his cigarette. "Billy, this goes wrong. You're on your own. No official backup. No extraction plan. You get caught, we deny everything. Wouldn't have it any other way," I said. And that was that. I had 2 weeks to figure out how to burn down a Securitate safe house in the middle of Bucharest without getting caught, without starting an international incident, and without leaving any evidence that could trace back to us. Simple, easy, the kind of job that gets people killed. I loved it. The first 72 hours were all reconnaissance. I couldn't just walk up to the building and start asking questions that would flag me immediately. The Securitate weren't stupid. They'd chosen this location specifically because it was defensible and observable. Any new face in the neighborhood would get noted, cataloged, assessed, so I worked the periphery first. My cover was solid. British telecommunications consultant, name of Robert Fletcher, working for Thomson CSF on contract with the Romanian state telephone monopoly. I had business cards. I had credentials. I had a work order that looked legitimate enough to pass casual inspection. The agency had done good work on the documentation. I started 3 blocks away from the target building, going door to door in apartment complexes, explaining that we were surveying the telephone infrastructure in preparation for system upgrades. Most people didn't give a damn. They just wanted better phone service. A few were suspicious. That was normal in a police state, but nobody refused to let me look at their wiring panels. I worked my way closer over 5 days, kept notes, sketched diagrams, asked questions about service interruptions and line quality. I was building a pattern, establishing myself as a legitimate presence in the neighborhood. By the time I reached the target block, I'd been seen enough times that I was just another foreign technician doing boring technical work. The target building was on Strada Vieler, a side street off one of the main thoroughfares in Sector 4. 4 stories, maybe 30 apartments total. Ground floor had a small grocery and a tailor's shop. Residential above. The Securitate Safehouse was 2nd floor, apartment 203, corner unit with windows overlooking the street and the alley behind the building. I approached the building at 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Knocked on the ground floor apartment first, introduced myself, asked about phone service. The resident, an old woman who smelled like cabbage and suspicion, let me into her kitchen to check the telephone box. I made notes, tested the line, thanked her, moved on. 2nd floor. I knocked on 201. No answer. Knocked on 202. A young mother with a baby answered. Looked exhausted. Didn't care about my cover story, but let me check her phone anyway. I thanked her. Made more notes. Moved down the hall. Apartment 203. The safe house. I knocked. Waited. Knocked again. The door opened 6 inches. A man's face appeared in the gap, mid-30s. Hard eyes. Clean shaven. He didn't say anything. Just looked at me. "Good morning," I said in Romanian, keeping my accent deliberately British inflected. "I'm with Thomson CSF, conducting telephone infrastructure surveys for the state monopoly. May I check your connection panel?" "It'll only take a moment." "No," he said. Flat. Final. Started to close the door. I put my hand on the door frame. Not aggressive, just persistent. "Sir, I understand. But this is part of a citywide survey. If I don't complete the inspection, your building may be deprioritized for service improvements." I said no. His eyes were cold. Professional. This wasn't some random resident protecting his privacy. This was a trained operative protecting an operational site. "May I at least leave you the survey form? You can contact the monopoly office if you have concerns about..." "Leave." He shut the door. I heard the lock engage. Perfect. I'd confirmed the safe house was active. I'd established my cover, and I'd given them exactly what they expected, a persistent but harmless foreign contractor doing exactly what his paperwork said he was doing. They'd note the interaction, check my credentials against their files, find everything in order, and dismiss me as irrelevant. I finished the rest of the floor, 3rd floor, 4th floor. Same routine. By the time I left the building at noon, I'd surveyed every apartment except 203, collected legitimate information, and embedded myself in the building's recent history. Now came the hard part. That evening, I met with the station chief in a safe location, a rented apartment in Sector 2, 3 miles from the embassy. He had coffee waiting, terrible Romanian coffee that tasted like burnt motor oil, but it was hot and it was caffeinated. Did you make contact? He asked. Confirm the Safehouse is active. One operator on site at mid-morning. Professional, alert, refused entry. He'll have reported the interaction. Will that blow your cover? No, my documentation is solid. He did exactly what he should have done, refused a stranger access to an operational site, but he didn't escalate. That means they're confident in their security. Good. What's your assessment? I pulled out my notes. Building has 2 entrances, front and rear. Rear entrance leads to a service alley, accessible from the street behind. Fire escape on the east side, accessible from the alley. The Safehouse apartment has windows on 2 sides, street-facing and alley-facing. They can observe both approaches. Security, standard residential locks on the main doors. The Safehouse apartment will have reinforced locks, maybe a bar. Windows are old-style wooden frames. Single-pane glass. No visible security cameras, but they might have internal surveillance. Occupancy patterns? Unknown. I only saw one operator during daylight hours. Station reports suggest they run shifts, probably 2 or 3 people during peak surveillance hours, 1 or 2 overnight. We need more observation to confirm patterns. He nodded. How do you want to play it? I need 3 more days of observation. I'll establish patterns, identify shift changes, find their vulnerability window, then we move. And the actual operation? I lean back. We burn it. Not metaphorically. Actually burn it. Make it look like an electrical fire old building, faulty wiring, tragedy but not suspicious. The Securitate will know what happened, but they won't be able to prove anything. And more importantly, they lose their surveillance post and 6 months of operational setup. Can you make an electrical fire look legitimate? Yeah. Overloaded circuit, damaged insulation, spark in the wrong place. Happens all the time in these old buildings. The key is making sure the fire starts in the right location and spreads fast enough that they can't stop it, but controlled enough that it doesn't take the whole building. What about casualties? We time it when occupancy is minimal. Middle of the night, skeleton crew, 1 or 2 operators maximum. We give them time to get out. I'm not here to kill people. I'm here to destroy their operational capability. They'll evacuate. The apartment burns. Mission accomplished. He was quiet for a moment. You sure you can pull this off? Yeah, I said. I'm sure. He handed me a slip of paper. Equipment list. Acquire what you need through the local procurement network. Nothing traceable to the embassy. Stay off the radar. I took the paper. Accelerants. Timing mechanisms. Basic electrical components. Nothing exotic. Nothing that would raise flags at a hardware store. 2 things, he said. First, this operation is off books. If you get caught, we can't help you. Second, if this goes wrong and people die, that's on you, not the agency. You. Understood, I said. Then get it done. I spent the next 3 days watching the building. Not from close range that would draw attention. I used a rented room in an apartment building 2 blocks south with a sight line to the target. Set up a spotting scope, kept logs, documented every movement. The Securitate were creatures of habit, and habits are what get you killed in this business. Shift changes happened twice daily, 7 in the morning and 7 at night. 2 operators would arrive, 2 would leave. During the day, they ran a 3-person team, 1 watching the street, 1 monitoring communications equipment, 1 on rest rotation. At night, they dropped to 2 people, sometimes 1. The vulnerable window was between 2 and 5 in the morning. That's when human beings are at their lowest physical and mental capacity. That's when attention drifts. That's when mistakes happen. On the 3rd night of observation, I confirmed what I needed. Between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning, only 1 operator remained in the Safehouse. The others had left at midnight early rotation, possibly due to reduced operational tempo. The single operator was running minimal surveillance, probably monitoring communications intercepts and maintaining a passive watch on the street. That was my window. I spent the fourth day acquiring equipment, nothing from a single source. I hit 4 different hardware stores across 3 different districts, bought electrical wire at one, insulation at another, basic tools at a third, picked up accelerant components from a chemical supply warehouse, industrial cleaning solvents, nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, a Romanian with the right paperwork buying supplies for legitimate work. By evening, I had everything I needed. That night, I assembled the device in my rented apartment. Simple design, an electrical short disguised as faulty wiring, combined with an accelerant distribution system that would look like ruptured cleaning supply bottles. The key was creating a fire that would start small, spread fast, and look completely accidental to any investigator who wasn't specifically looking for arson. The timing mechanism was crude but effective, a modified alarm clock connected to a small electrical heating element. When the alarm triggered, the element would heat, ignite the accelerant-soaked insulation, and create a fire that would spread through the apartment's wooden interior structures. By the time anyone noticed, the Safehouse would be fully involved. I set the trigger for 3:15 in the morning. That gave me time to place the device, exit the building, and establish an alibi before the fire started. The night of the operation, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Not because of nerves. I'd done worse jobs in worse places, but because the operational clock was running in my head and I needed to stay sharp. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I dressed in dark clothing. Not black, that's what amateurs wear. Dark gray, dark blue, colors that don't stand out but don't shout I'm trying to be invisible either. I carried a small canvas tool bag with the device inside, broken down into components. To anyone watching, I was a maintenance worker or a contractor. Nothing special. I left my apartment at 1:30. The streets were empty. Bucharest at night in '76 was a dead city. Curfews weren't officially enforced, but people stayed inside anyway. The Securitate owned the night, and smart people didn't give them reasons to ask questions. I moved through back streets, staying off main thoroughfares. Took 20 minutes to cover the 8 blocks to the target building. I approached from the rear, through the service alley. No lights, no movement. The building was dark except for a single window on the second floor of the Safehouse. One light burning behind drawn curtains. One operator, just like the pattern had shown. The rear entrance to the building was locked, but it was a simple mechanism. I had it open in 30 seconds with a basic pick set, slipped inside, closed the door behind me, stood in the darkness of the back hallway, listening. Nothing. Just the sound of old buildings settling, distant traffic from the main road 3 blocks over. I moved to the stairwell, climbed to the second floor. The hallway was dark. I kept my steps soft, heel to toe, weight distributed. Old habits from jungle work in Southeast Asia. Move like you're hunting. Move like every sound could get you killed. Apartment 203 was at the end of the hall. Light visible under the door. I could hear faint sounds from inside, papers rustling, a chair creaking, someone moving around. The operator was awake, working. Good. If he'd been sleeping, this would have been harder. The building's utility access panel was in the hallway, 15 feet from the Safehouse door. Standard communist construction, everything centralized, everything accessible for state maintenance crews. I opened the panel quietly. Inside were electrical connections for the entire floor, water shutoffs, and a maintenance chase that ran vertically through the building. Perfect. I pulled the device components from my bag, assembled them quickly, electrical short mechanism, accelerant packets, timing trigger. The whole thing was about the size of a shoebox. I placed it in the maintenance chase directly behind the wall that separated the utility panel from apartment 203. The accelerant packets were positioned to rupture when the electrical element heated, spreading flammable liquid along the wooden support structures inside the wall. I set the timer, 3:15, just under 2 hours from now. Then I closed the utility panel, walked back down the hall, descended the stairs, and left the building through the rear entrance. Locked the door behind me, moved through the alley, back into the side streets, away from the target area. By 2 o'clock, I was 3 blocks away. By 2:30, I was back in my apartment, changing clothes, establishing my alibi. If anyone asked, I'd been asleep since midnight. Just another British contractor, exhausted from a long day of surveying Romanian telephone infrastructure. At 3:15 in the morning, I was sitting by my window, watching the direction of the target building. I didn't see the fire start. The building was too far away, blocked by other structures. But at 3:22, I saw the glow, orange light reflecting off windows in nearby buildings. Then, faintly, I heard sirens. I waited. At 4 o'clock, I walked toward the target area, not rushing, just a curious foreigner drawn by the commotion. By the time I reached the street, there were fire trucks, police vehicles, and a crowd of residents evacuated from surrounding buildings. The target building was burning. Second floor, east side, right where the Safehouse had been. Flames were visible through broken windows. Smoke poured into the night sky. Firefighters were running hoses, shouting orders, trying to contain the blaze. I stood at the edge of the crowd, just another observer. I saw 2 Securitate operators standing near a police vehicle, wrapped in blankets, looking pissed off and exhausted. They'd gotten out. Good. I wasn't trying to kill them, just destroy their operational capability. A Romanian police officer was interviewing residents. When he got to me, I played my role, concerned British contractor, staying in the area for work, woken by sirens, came to see what happened. Do you know what started it? I asked in Romanian. Electrical fire, the officer said, not particularly interested in me. Old building, old wiring, it happens. Terrible, I said. Was anyone hurt? No, everyone got out. Very lucky. Yes, I said, very lucky. I stayed for another 20 minutes, then drifted away as the fire was brought under control. By dawn, I was back in my apartment. By mid-morning, I was at a cafe 3 kilometers away, drinking terrible coffee and reading a newspaper that would later report the fire as an unfortunate but not suspicious incident. The station chief contacted me that afternoon through a brush pass in a market, handed me a newspaper, walked on. Inside the newspaper was a note. Confirmed, Safehouse destroyed, equipment lost. Operations suspended. Well done. The Securitate knew what had happened. They knew someone had hit them, but they couldn't prove it. No evidence, no witnesses, just an old building with old wiring that finally gave out at a very convenient time. That's how you run a deniable operation. That's how you burn down a Safehouse without starting a war. But the operation wasn't over. Not really. Burning the Safehouse was just the opening move. The Securitate weren't going to shrug it off and move on. They'd investigate. They'd look for patterns. They'd go through their records and identify anyone new in the neighborhood in the weeks before the fire. And eventually, they'd find me. Not immediately. The agency's cover documentation was solid. Robert Fletcher, British telecommunications consultant, had legitimate work orders, legitimate business reasons to be in Sector 4, legitimate documentation that would hold up to all but the deepest scrutiny. But given enough time, enough pressure, enough paranoia, the Securitate would start connecting dots. So I had to disappear, carefully, gradually, in a way that didn't raise flags. The day after the fire, I continued my cover work, showed up at buildings, surveyed telephone infrastructure, filed reports. Just another contractor doing his job. The station chief had been clear. Maintain the cover, don't alter your pattern, don't do anything that suggests you know what happened. But I started laying groundwork for departure. I mentioned to a colleague at the telephone monopoly office that my contract was nearing completion. I sent a message to my fictional employer in London, a message that would be intercepted and read by Romanian intelligence, explaining that the infrastructure survey was substantially complete and requesting guidance on whether to extend the contract or return to the UK for reassignment. 2 days after the fire, I received a response, also crafted by the agency, indicating that the company wanted me back in London for a new project in West Germany. Perfect. Legitimate business reason to leave Romania. Nothing suspicious. But I didn't leave immediately. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I continued working for another week, wrapping up documentation, filing final reports, conducting last-minute surveys. I even expressed mild frustration to Romanian colleagues that the contract was ending just as I was getting comfortable with the work. The Securitate were watching. I knew they were watching, but they were watching Robert Fletcher, telecommunications consultant, not Billy Waugh, case officer. And Robert Fletcher was exactly what his paperwork said. He was a technician, completing a contract and moving on to the next job. During that final week, I ran one more reconnaissance pass through Sector 4. Not obvious, just casual observation while conducting legitimate survey work in the area. The target building was still standing, but the second floor was gutted, burned black, windows blown out. The entire east side of the structure was marked with fire damage. Residents had been temporarily relocated. The building was condemned pending structural assessment. The Safehouse was gone. Not just burned, destroyed. Months of operational setup, surveillance equipment, communications, intercept capabilities, operational records, all of it reduced to ash and twisted metal. The Securitate would have to start from scratch, find a new location, rebuild their surveillance network, reestablish their operational patterns, and by the time they did, the agency would have already adapted new routes, new procedures, new protocols that bypass whatever the Securitate set up next. That's the long game. That's how you win in intelligence work. Not through single dramatic strikes, but through sustained pressure, forcing the opposition to constantly react, constantly rebuild, constantly waste resources on defensive measures while you maintain offensive initiative. 10 days after the fire, I departed Romania, took a train to Belgrade, then a flight to Vienna, then London. Standard travel pattern for a contractor completing an overseas assignment. Nothing unusual, nothing that would trigger additional scrutiny. In London, Robert Fletcher ceased to exist. The passport went into an agency vault. The documentation was archived. The cover identity was retired to exposed, too close to an operational success that the Securitate would eventually figure out. And I was debriefed at a Safehouse in Kensington, wrote my after-action report, spent 3 days going through operational details with a team of analysts who wanted to document every aspect of the mission for training purposes. Then I went back to work. Because that's what you do. You don't celebrate, you don't rest, you don't think you've accomplished something permanent. You just move to the next operation, the next target, the next problem that needs solving. 3 months later, I learned that the Securitate had indeed identified Robert Fletcher as a person of interest. They had gone through their records, found the timing of his presence in Sector 4, noted the coincidence of the Safehouse fire occurring during his contract period. They had filed a report with British intelligence, making inquiries about Thomson CSF and their contracting procedures. But by then, it didn't matter. Robert Fletcher was a dead identity. The real me was already running operations in a different country under a different name. The Securitate could investigate all they wanted. They'd find a perfectly constructed cover story that led nowhere. That's the beauty of good operational security. You don't prevent them from investigating. You just make sure that when they investigate, they find exactly what you want them to find, a plausible story that answers their questions without revealing anything that matters. The Bucharest station reported improved operational freedom after the Safehouse destruction. Asset meets became more secure. Dead drops were more reliable. Communications were less compromised. It took the Securitate nearly 8 months to rebuild their surveillance capability to pre-fire levels, and by then, the agency had adapted procedures enough that the new Securitate setup was significantly less effective than the old one. One operation, one Safehouse, 8 months of operational breathing room. That's a good return on investment. But here's what the after-action reports don't capture, what the analysts don't understand, what the people back at headquarters reading sanitized summaries can't appreciate: the operational reality of moving through a hostile city at 2 in the morning, carrying an improvised incendiary device, knowing that if you get caught, your own government will deny you ever existed. That's not something you can quantify in a report. That's not something you can teach in a classroom. That's something you only understand when you've done it, when you've walked into the shit with nothing but your cover story and your ability to think fast, and you've come out the other side with the mission accomplished and your head still attached to your shoulders. There were a dozen points where the operation could have gone wrong. The timing device could have malfunctioned. The fire could have spread too slowly, giving the Securitate time to contain it and preserve evidence. The operator inside could have noticed something wrong, investigated the utility panel, found the device before it activated. The Romanian police could have suspected arson and launched a serious investigation. My cover could have been penetrated. Any one of those failures would have meant mission failure at best, international incident at worst. But that's why you train. That's why you practice. That's why you run through contingency plans and backup procedures and abort protocols until they're second nature. Because when you're standing in a dark hallway in a hostile city, placing an incendiary device 15 feet from an enemy intelligence operator, you don't have time to think through options. You just execute. You do what you trained to do, and you trust that your preparation was good enough, and most of the time, it is. Most of the time, if you've done the work, if you've built the cover correctly, if you've planned the operation thoroughly, if you've thought through the contingencies, most of the time, you succeed. Not because you're lucky, not because the enemy is incompetent, but because you did the work and they didn't. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs rely on luck. Professionals create circumstances where luck doesn't matter. The Bucharest operation succeeded because I spent 4 days establishing a pattern before making the approach, because I built a cover identity that was deep enough to withstand casual investigation, because I observed the target until I knew their patterns better than they knew them themselves, because I chose a method that looked accidental and left no forensic trail, because I had an exit strategy that was as carefully planned as the operation itself, and because I volunteered for a job nobody else wanted, which meant I got to do something that mattered, in a place where it mattered, at a time when it mattered. That's the warrior mentality. That's what it means to want to be involved. Not because you love violence or destruction or danger, though those things come with the territory, but because you want to be where things happen, where decisions get made, where your actions have consequences that ripple beyond the immediate moment. The Safehouse burned, the operation succeeded, the agency gained operational advantage, and somewhere in Bucharest, a group of Securitate officers had to explain to their superiors how they lost 6 months of intelligence work in a single night to what appeared to be an electrical fire. That's a good day's work. So what do you take away from burning down a safe house in the middle of a hostile capital? What's the lesson that translates beyond that specific operation, that specific moment, that specific building on Strada Vilor in Bucharest in 1976? 3 things. 3 core principles that apply whether you're running covert operations in Eastern Europe or just trying to live your life with purpose and direction. First, volunteer for everything. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Volunteer for everything they come up, don't turn anything down. That Bucharest operation, nobody wanted it. Too risky, too sensitive, too many ways it could go wrong. But I raised my hand because that's what you do. You don't wait for the easy jobs. You don't wait for the safe assignments. You volunteer for the hard shit, the dangerous shit, the stuff that scares other people away, because that's where the real work happens. That's where you prove what you're made of. The station chief came to me with that folder because he knew I'd take it. He knew I wouldn't hesitate. He knew I'd figure it out. And that reputation is built one ugly operation at a time, one raised hand at a time, one I'll do it at a time. You build that reputation by never turning anything down, and once you have it, doors open that stay closed for everyone else. Never quit. There were moments during that operation when quitting would have been easy. When the Securitate operator refused me entry to the apartment, when I realized the shift patterns might not give me a clean window, when I was standing in that dark hallway at 2 in the morning, knowing that if I got caught, my government would disavow me. Easy moments to say this is too hard, or the risk is too high, or maybe someone else should handle this. But you don't. You don't quit. You adapt, you adjust, you find another way. Because the only real failure is giving up before you've exhausted every option. The operation succeeded because I kept working the problem until I found the solution. Not because I was smarter than the Securitate, not because I had better equipment, but because I didn't quit when things got complicated. Third, physical capability matters. I was pushing 50 years old when I ran that operation, not a kid anymore, not the young SF trooper who could run forever and carry impossible loads. But I could still move quietly through a building at 2 in the morning. I could still climb stairs without breathing hard. I could still carry equipment and place a device and get out clean. Why? Because I never stopped training. I never stopped maintaining the physical capability that makes operations possible. You can have the best plan in the world, but if you can't execute it because you're too old or too slow or too out of shape, the plan doesn't matter. Physical fitness isn't vanity. It's operational capability. It's the difference between mission success and mission failure. It's respect for the people who depend on you, because if you can't keep up, you're a liability, and liabilities get people killed. Those are the lessons. Those are the principles that translate from Bucharest to anywhere else you might find yourself. Volunteer for hard things. Never quit when it gets difficult. Maintain your physical capability so you can execute when it matters. Everything else is just details. One last thing before we're done here. People hear about operations like Bucharest, and they think it's about the fire, about the burning building, the destroyed Safehouse, the tactical success. And yeah, that stuff matters. The operation achieved its objective. The Securitate lost capability. The agency gained advantage. But that's not what I remember most about Bucharest. What I remember is standing in that hallway at 2:30 in the morning, placing that device, knowing that in less than an hour, an apartment was going to burn, knowing that people were going to wake up to smoke and flames, knowing that even though I'd calculated the risk, even though I'd planned for evacuations, there was still a chance someone wouldn't get out, and doing it anyway, because the mission mattered more than comfort, because protecting agency operations mattered more than avoiding risk, because sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same thing, and when they're different, you choose the right thing. That's what being a warrior means. Not the fighting, not the danger, not the cool stories or the successful operations. It means being willing to do what's necessary, even when it's hard, even when it's risky, even when it keeps you awake at night wondering if you made the right call. The Safehouse burned. The mission succeeded, and I stood in a crowd of Romanian civilians at 4 in the morning, watching firefighters battle flames, knowing I was responsible for what they were fighting, and accepting that responsibility without flinching. That's the fire that matters, not the one that burned in Bucharest, the one that burns inside the drive to be involved, to take action, to accept responsibility for hard choices and live with the consequences. You want to know what it means to be a warrior? That's it. Not the operations, not the tactics, not the successful missions. It's the willingness to carry the weight of what you've done and keep moving forward anyway. Volunteer for everything. Never quit. Stay physically capable, and when the hard moment comes, and it will come, do what needs doing and own the consequences. The rest is just fire and smoke.